Welcome back to the Delore Factor. I'm here with Shane Ross, and we're just talking about any and everything, really. One of the things that you said in our first segment, we touched on men, you know, a little. I wanted to talk to you about men because I know there are different categories of men, just as there are different categories of women. But on the whole, I think that men get bad press. I think that whenever anything goes wrong, most of the time, they want to blame the man. I say they, women mostly want to blame the man.
The opinionated side of me is going to come out again. In some instances, you know, men get bad press, deservingly so. And in the same vein that women get bad press, sometimes deservedly so. It's just that I think that there's so many different pressures that are placed on men. And when I say men, I'm talking about just the male gender from the time you're a boy. I mean, there are different things that you kind of have to conform to, if you will, where there's certain things that as a man you're expected to do those things because it's macho. You're expected to keep your feelings bottled up. You're expected not to cry. You're expected to, you know, even growing up, you'd see some parents sometimes with a male child and be like, stop crying, don't cry. You know, you're not supposed to cry. Don't, and it kind of holds us back emotionally, where, you know, sometimes somebody wants you or needs you to be that sort of emotional support, and rather than being that, you find it easier to be more or less financial or psychological or some other form of support, whereas the emotional side of it is just as important as all those other sides. In terms of, I think as a Caribbean man, the dynamic that we face is different. And even more so as a black Caribbean man, I've seen instances where, you know, there are people who come from different ethnic backgrounds. And I mean, I don't want to sound racist or prejudiced or anything like that, but for example, I've seen the way that certain family types interact with each other, where it's more, you know, you'd see boys growing up and kissing their dad on the cheek or on the forehead or whatever. And I'll be honest, I didn't grow up knowing those things. So I think the dynamic is different. First off, where ethnicity is concerned, and then it goes even further individually based on your own life experiences. Well,
I think that's the best thing you've said so far.
That's the best.
You know, the end bit of that.
Okay.
The end bit of that, in terms of, I disagree when we look at the cultures, although I know in some societies, families tend to be closer. But I think that when it comes to knowing love, showing love, and knowing what we ought to do in life, I think that has nothing to do with our color or our sex.
Well,
I think it's to do with the kind of family we have grown up in, where the family is a communicator, where that family has a mother or a father who can talk and communicate.
Well,
because we are told too much. We are told, do this, do that, do this, and not explained why we need to do it.
Well, I think, and I guess that's where I would tend to disagree with you, because if it goes down to your family ties, right? We have to understand that, for example, in the Caribbean, where we're just a few generations removed from slavery, where in that period of time, the family structure was entirely different, and so much so that, and going back to what I said earlier about some of the pressures that are placed on a young man, and I dare say a young black man, again, because most of the times it's because of the family structure. And when I say the family structure, I'm not referring to perhaps this generation, but some of the characteristics within your family that have been there for a couple of generations, really. Because if you look back far enough, I almost guarantee that you'll find some similarities between, let's say, your father and your great-grandfather, or your father and your grandfather, that sort of thing. So these sorts of things, as little as they may seem, but they have a ripple effect. For example, if your father is one who doesn't hug you, for example, it might take a lot more from you to show love in that way. It's not that you don't feel love.
I agree.
But expressing it to you, it might feel awkward, socially awkward for you to hug your hug your son or your daughter, or to, you know, to do something like that. And if it's socially awkward for you, it's not that you don't love the child or you don't love that person, but it's just that doing it for you presents, or rather showing love in that way presents a bit of a challenge. So instead, you know, you'd find some other way to express your love. You figure, okay, you know what, I'm buying you all your school books, or I'll buy you a bike that you wanted, or I'll buy something, or I'll do something else. I'll take you fishing. You know, without necessarily hugging you, I'll show you how to. But I think individuals find different ways of expressing that love, and the ways that we choose to express that love, or rather the ways that we choose not to express that love, are based on those family, I guess the family history, if you will. And as much as a lot of people think that, you know what, it doesn't influence who you are today, but it really and truly does.
Of course, yeah. You know, I used to be one of those people who thought, well, I remember when I was growing up in England, they would teach us a lot about history, and I'd be like, I don't want to know about history. I mean, I want to deal with today, talk to me about today. And then it's only when I started living in the Caribbean, I realized just how important history was. Because of course, when I was in the UK, they wasn't teaching me about my roots. They weren't teaching me about Africa, the way I wanted to know about Africa. They were teaching me about the Vikings and the Tudors and Mary Queen of Scots, and they even spoke to me about Ireland, you know, the land of the potatoes. But they never said anything to me about, you know, where I came from and the good people. It was, if they spoke to me about where I came from, or the people the same color of my skin, we were always, you know, it became the norm to me to see a black skin and think, not in slavery, that we were just there to do what we were told to do. Wow.
Now, I can't imagine growing up like that, because obviously St. Lucia is predominantly black in terms of ethnicity. So if anything, I think here, if you're not black, it might be harder to fit in.
You know, when you were saying that, I was thinking, I wonder, you know, how Caucasian people feel when they are suddenly taken from, you know, their international countries where they are the majority, and then they come to live here and become the minority. And of course, I'm talking about the people who were not born in St. Lucia. And I actually think the Caucasian people who are born in St. Lucia, sometimes, well, I have a lot of Caucasian friends who are born in St. Lucia, and they will say to me that they'll either be really loved and accepted, or people even say to them, go back to your country. And they say, but I was born here. This is my country. We're never going to get rid of that, are we?
I think it's so sad that it's unfortunate that we find ways of dividing ourselves. But at the end of the day, I think all of us feel certain emotion on a certain level. It's just the expression of that emotion that's different. For example, somebody who didn't grow up in St. Lucia, who wasn't born in St. Lucia, or who isn't black, for example, even though you might stand out, but I don't think it should be something that should be held against you, if you will. And when I say held against you, excuse me, even that, I have to be careful when I say it.
Yeah, well, you know, think carefully how you're going to say it whilst we go to the break. See you soon.